The vampire you know, the pale, immortal predator of moonlit castles, is only the newest face of a much older fear. Long before the Gothic novel, before silver screens and black capes, there was another world. A land of deep forests, frozen rivers, and villages lit only by firelight. Here, the dead did not always rest in peace, and some, it was said, clawed their way back. In these lands, the living watch their dead carefully, for in the shadows of the Slavic world, life and death were never far apart, and both could change without warning. This is the story of the Slavic world, the cradle of the vampire. In the early Middle Ages, as the Roman Empire's shadow faded, the Slavs emerged, a vast web of tribes stretching from the Baltic in the north to the Balkans in the south, and from the Elbe in the west to the Volga in the east. They were farmers, hunters, fishermen, and herders, people who read the seasons like a book and feared the signs when they turned. Death was never far. A sudden frost could kill a harvest, disease could strike without warning, and war was a constant threat. Ancestors were honored, but also feared. The Slavs believed that the boundary between the living and the dead was porous, and under the wrong conditions, that boundary could break. Byzantine chroniclers, such as Procopius in the 6th century, described strange burials in Slavic lands, corpses with stones weighing down their chests, bodies pierced with wooden stakes or decapitated and laid face down. Such measures, they wrote, were taken to prevent the dead from walking. The names of these feared beings varied from tribe to tribe. Upir, Striga, Strigoi. Some were thought to drink blood. Others brought sickness or misfortune. But all had one thing in common. They were the dead who refused to stay dead. The Slavic world was not one empire, but a tapestry of kinship groups, each bound by blood ties and led by local chieftains. They built fortified hill forts, traded along rivers, and held their gods in sacred groves far from human settlement. Life was bound to the land. Wheat, barley, and rye were sown in spring. Cattle and goats grazed in summer. Winters were harsh. Food was scarce. Wolves prowled the edges of villages, and sickness could cut through an entire household in weeks. In this world, misfortune always had a cause. If a cow stopped giving milk, if a baby wasted away, if illness spread from one house to the next, suspicion could fall on someone recently buried. A relative, a neighbor, perhaps someone who had died with unfinished business or under a curse. The graveyard was not a place of rest, but a place to be watched. And if the living suspected that one of their own had returned from death, the village acted. Slavic belief held that the soul lingered after death for a time, a period when it could bless the living or curse them. The most dangerous dead, known as Nav, were those who died violently, without proper rites, or whose lives were marked by sin or taboo. Such spirits could become upiri, revenants that rose to drain the strength, health, and even blood of the living. To stop them, protective measures were many. Driving an aspen stake through the chest, placing heavy stones in the mouth to block the spirit's passage, burying the body at the crossroads to confuse its soul, severing the head and placing it between the legs. These practices, recorded in both archaeology and folklore, were common enough that modern excavations in Poland, Bulgaria, and the Czech Republic have uncovered skeletons with sickles placed across their necks, a last desperate safeguard against the undead. When Christianity arrived between the 9th and 12th centuries, it did not erase these fears. Instead, it reframed them. The Orthodox Church taught that revenants were not merely restless souls, they were the work of demons. The vampire became both a relic of pagan superstition and a weapon in the devil's hand. As Slavic tribes transformed into kingdoms and principalities, Poland, Kievan Rus, Serbia, Bulgaria, the old gods faded from public worship. Pagan rituals moved to the shadows, but in the villages, nothing truly disappeared. By the early modern period, vampire belief had not weakened, it had sharpened. In the 18th century, the Austrian-ruled Balkans were gripped by what historians call the vampire panics. One of the most famous was the case of Arnold Paole, a Serbian soldier who reportedly returned from the dead to attack his neighbors. Eyewitness accounts describe exhumed bodies that were unnervingly fresh, with blood at the mouth. In panic, villagers staked and burnt them. To the Enlightenment's thinkers, these were the acts of ignorance. But to the people who lived in constant proximity to death, it was survival. In a world without germ theory, without forensic science, fear filled the gaps left by the unknown. From the Balkans, the vampire crossed into Western Europe. Serbian soldiers in Habsburg service carried the word vampire into German, French, and English, one of the few Slavic words to enter the European lexicon unchanged. By the 19th century, the vampire was remade by Western literature. John Polidori's The Vampire, Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmilla, and finally Bram Stoker's Dracula transformed the bloated peasant revenant into the elegant, predatory nobleman. Yet the bones of the legend remain Slavic, in the graves staked through, in the winter nights, and the whispered charms muttered at the door. Even today, fragments survive. In some remote villages, garlic is hung in doorways, iron needles are left in shrouds, and the graves of suicides are set apart from the rest, not in fear of stories, but in quiet deference to traditions older than memory. The vampire endures because it speaks to something timeless. The fear that death is not the end, that the grave is not a barrier, and that what returns from the dark may come for us. In the shadowed forests and frozen fields of the Slavic world, that fear had a name, and once it took root, it never died.